Okay, hello there everybody. We are live once again for another deep dive. And today we have, from New York City, Dysonant joining us for some Q&A. And let me manage my audio settings over here so I'm not hearing weird echoes. Already got a few people on the chat line. That's great. Thanks for showing up, everybody. Also, my usual partners in crime, Cody and Steve, here to keep me from wandering off into the weeds and getting lost, which I tend to do. And so what else? Welcome to summer. We missed last month, just got busy with all sorts of production stuff and didn't quite make sense, so we're back again. We're going to show some new features we're working on for the next firmware release. We're going to be taking a much shorter schedule this time. So instead of shooting for a big release that takes months and months to finish, we're going to be doing a series of smaller releases. And so there'll be just a few things in each release, mix of bug fixes, of course, and some new features. We got some cool stuff to show you. So let's dive right in. I'm going to switch over to my system real quick and give it a wake-up call. So first, I've rearranged some things.
Hey everyone, just a quick housekeeping note. If you're on the YouTube chat, feel free to type any questions in, and also go to the chat option at the top of the little window there and select all chat or real-time chat. What's the setting called? Live chat. All messages will be available, because otherwise you'll just get a curated thing.
Cool. All right, so on the
pin
sequence
yourself, Jim, please.
And
pin yourself, big screen.
Pin. Should be pin.
There you go. Done.
You got it? Okay, cool. So we've added a couple things in the sequence control area, and that has necessitated a little reorganization. So we have a couple new pages, and actually just one new page. So it's 4 total for non-drum sequencers, and then for drum sequencers is 1 extra page for note assignment. So the first page stays the same. These are your classic sequence controls. On the next page, we've moved chabar, velocity, and PQNT up to the second row, if I remember correctly. Chabar is chance bar, so this controls whether chance bar operations happen on a pattern repeat or on musical bars, which are still set at 4 beats per bar. So this is a useful setting that I think people occasionally forget about and really need. So remember that one. The velocity setting controls whether velocity is demonstrated with bars or numeric values. Here's the numeric value readout. And then PQNT is preset quantized, so whether presets are quantized on a beat or bar or none. So leave that alone for now. This next page has lots of open space, so generate and evolve are now down here. This parameter here is called free gate for now. This is one of the things we're working on. We'll come back to this in a few minutes. And then now we have a MIDI page with our 3 CC assignments here, and over here our first new feature reveal, which is bank and program change send. And I think Steve is queued up to demonstrate this in a little bit. Is that so?
Yep, that is so.
Excellent. And so this is stored per preset, and we put it in sequence control. Initially I was looking at putting it in the preset edit area, but well, this is all pretty busy. I'd have to add a second page, and that gets a little complicated. And as Steve rightfully pointed out, we already have these MIDI settings here in sequence control, so this seems like a reasonable place to put them. One interesting detail on the usability front we have to work out is there are 2 different ways to send bank changes. They're both MIDI CC messages, one for coarse and one for fine, and some synthesizers use one and some use the other, so we're going to be doing a fair bit of exploratory testing to see what makes sense in terms of what to send, when to send it, and how the UI should work. And then on the last, this is the last MIDI page. Okay, so next up, if you look at the LaunchPad, I'm playing around with an in-fourths layout for the keyboard. So normally the keyboard is kind of a roughly traditional layout with 4 octaves, and each 2 rows represents 12 keys. In this case, it's more like the standard LaunchPad key setup, but also used on Linstrument and other grid instruments, where it repeats in fourths. So C, D, E, F, G, and then this note up here is an F, 1/4 up. Here's the G again, the 5th, A, B, C again. And
so guitarists and bass players, excuse me, will recognize this pattern because it looks like the good old major / Ionian mode starting from the bottom left down there, which is good fun.
Yeah, yeah. So this has kind of been a fun layout to play with. We can still octave jump with these keys. Steve told me I had to keep the old layout available somehow, so probably that'll be available on these 2 keys here to flip between layouts.
And what does that sound like when you just play a few notes in that scale for those of us a little more music illiterate?
Well, let me jump over to through mode and turn the filter up a little bit.
Nice.
So yeah,
what happens if you if you hit a grey note, that plays as well? Because yeah, there you go.
For now, yeah. I think that should probably follow the quantize settings. You know, an interesting design decision is I was considering having a mode where you don't have the grayed out areas at all. It just compresses everything, and then you could have 1 octave per row across 8 octaves. And still might pursue that at some point, but in terms of just general learning the keyboard and getting used to the layout and everything, I think it's better, even if you have quantize on, to have this format. And then of course, since we don't have the usual white-black key pattern going on, there's no reason we can't have these notes follow the current key and scale, and I don't think that's implemented yet. This is, of course, this is technically alpha software, we're not even quite to beta yet. But this could certainly follow the bass note, either the key you set here or the key
would be excellent
that you set here, and also of course the scale. And which means the pattern would change a little bit for major versus minor scales and so forth.
That would be incredible, Jim. Could you just go ahead and email that for a feature request, please? So that'd be amazing if you could sort of get those pad presentations lit up based on the, well, not just major or minor, but what if I chose like F Mixolydian? You know, that'd be cool.
Sure, sure.
You know, so.
Also a nice way to just break up music theory for folks that don't know it as well. If you just follow it linearly all the way up, then it tells you if it's whole step, or a half step, etc. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It helps you get the finger moves in your hand going. It helps you when you don't know a scale and you're trying to find things. You know, one difference versus the standard layout on the LaunchPad is I added highlights in purple for the fifths, just because for me in particular, you know, if all of these are blue, then sometimes I'm like, wait, where's the 5th versus the 4th? This makes this a little easier to find.
Well, and also there was a discussion online recently about a feature that could be accommodated by utilizing this page of the LaunchPad. If you just wanted to operate inside of the 2nd and 3rd octave, then you can just strictly use the buttons inside of the 2nd and 3rd octave and just stay inside of that range of notes, or, you know, use the full range of notes that are available. But I feel like there was someone who was asking about having a range of notes available instead of the full range of notes, and this seems like a great way to narrow down what you're working with.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that was about like masking notes within a scale.
Yeah.
which is cool. A sort of a cool idea. I think that was. I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, but here we go. Toke, that was him. Yeah. So masking notes, pretty sure.
Yeah. No, custom scales of some sort or another have been a frequent request, and I can't say yet when that will happen, but I think that's going to happen at some point. And you know, accommodating that on this keyboard would make a lot of sense. And of course, it is one thing that's nice about the grid setup is that it's fairly agnostic in terms of how many notes per octave and how you color notes and so forth.
But in the meantime, before you get to custom scales for us later, this is a great way to isolate some notes inside of those scales.
Yes, absolutely. And then one thing I'd been thinking of, particularly with regards to the arpeggiator, is this bottom right-hand corner. I'm thinking of making this a dedicated hold button. So whatever you're doing, you know, you can. Well, this is a monophonic patch, but if you were playing chords, you know, push and hold this to hold the chord, or even if we can avoid using the rest of these for velocity, which is what they are now, is for setting velocity. But yeah, see, I have a feeling I can just like forget we did that and then use these buttons for chord memory, which is an interesting idea. So play a chord, hold the button down, let it blink, release it, and now anytime you want you can press that button and get the chord.
And can you move that per note? So I did a C major and then I pressed that button, then I hit an F with that button enabled and I got an F major or something like that?
I'm just extrapolating, Steve. We'll have to discuss that later.
All right. I'm extrapolating too. So.
Yeah. So I mean, this is something for all of you on the chat line, right? Is tell us what you think about these ideas, and you know, make suggestions. Now is a time when I can adjust the code more easily than, you know, after we get the beta releases out and things are more locked down.
Let's zoom in on a word you used a second ago too, which was arpeggiation. That's a cool word you just threw in there.
Yeah, I just threw that in there. So so we talked about program change, we talked about the keyboard change. So the next up is indeed arpeggiation, which is a new mode, the record side of things. And the general idea is that this is tied into your sequence, so that what you're doing when you're in arpeggio mode is changing what notes are in the sequence and generally how long the sequence is. And so if I check to make sure things are still working as I play notes. Let me adjust the gate steps to make sure that's working properly. So I have latch mode on, so I play a chord. It programs the notes on the sequence. I'm playing over one octave and the pattern mode is down up, so it will take the 3 notes I play. We'll sort them in order, down, going down. Actually, it just sorts them and then repeats them going down. And then for a 1-note pattern, just plays that note. 2-note pattern, just plays those 2 notes. As soon as you add a 3rd note, which actually I played more than that. There we go.
I have a question real quick, Jim. Are you triggering multiple notes, or is there a ratchet turned on for some of those steps? I'm just curious about the arpeggiation, the amount of notes that the arpeggiator is actually controlling. Is there ratchets involved?
No, not yet.
Okay, sweet.
All right, and I turned the sound on, so maybe now you can hear me. That would.
No, we could hear it previously.
No, we could hear it. We could hear it.
Okay.
If you just press your ratchet button or your length button, because it sounds okay, or the length button.
I have them in chance off.
Okay. That's where they are.
That's
Got it.
Yeah. I was playing around with it earlier and forgot to turn them off. But
no, it sounded good. But I think
we can turn those off, turn them back on in a minute.
Awesome. That's it.
Cool. Yeah, neat. Yeah, that's quite the game changer for control of your ARP generations. Very good stuff.
And so with latch mode, the nice thing, of course, is you can program in your chord and then start messing around with the settings, and it'll reprogram the sequences needed. We turn latch off, and an advantage is that we can hold notes and change the chord as we play. So only the notes we've held down. Are playing, and then if I find something I like, I can turn latch back on, release the keyboard, pattern stays.
I love it.
So how many, I mean, I suppose you could route this to multiple parts so that way, you know, multiple arpeggios are feeding multiple instruments. Someone's asking, and I'm trying to understand the question a little more articulately, can the arpeggiator notes be forwarded in round robin on the expander is the question.
I don't think so. I have to think about that. There might be an easy way to do that. That's kind of tied into chord mode, right? In chord mode, you're outputting notes per voice.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Have to chew on that for a while.
And pitch going out. Yeah, okay. It's all kind of like a sequential switch, but yeah. Anyway,
yeah. So right, Steve. So it might be that the way to do it is not necessarily tied to the arpeggiator, but make it a general function, right? Where somehow you take a monophonic sequence and you split it out over multiple outputs.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah. So also of note that we had running earlier is that the rest of this is just writing to the sequence, right? So you can have chance operations. So like before, I had these guys set up with some ratchets going. Of course, your gate settings, you know, are available. The regular ratchets, modulation, the rate of the sequence, right? That's all available still, right?
What happens if you end up changing the direction?
Well, let's see.
It does exactly what you would.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mr. Dysonant.
Well, it's great because you can just initiate a few variations and save them to each of your scenes, and then just make quick switches, and now you've got a whole song. That's a real fast way to develop something.
And that's.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
So,
I found a couple of interesting things to do with it too, Jim, which I'll be happy to
yeah. Okay.
run out.
No, I'm curious to hear your take on how you're incorporating this into some of your new work. Let's see, what else to cover? So we have sort modes: up, down, down, up. Played,
Left, right,
which is
PA. Sorry, it was a bad Contra reference.
played, which is the order you played them. There'll be a random mode, which again you can start with one of these, and then you can basically go into the sequence controls and kind of further mess with it. And this latches, the recording mode is on regardless of where you are, and I'm not quite set up to do that, but there's no reason you can't have one arpeggiation from here driving 2 or 3 different parts. In fact, I've got some notes to go and check and make sure that, say, for transpose, if you're holding down a chord, that it always uses the lowest note. So you could play a chord, have two parts arpeggiating off that, maybe at different rates, different registers, have another part or two that's transposed based on the lowest note you've played. So definitely the idea is to make this, expand this more than just, oh, this is a cool way to mess with one part, is to be able to control several parts at once with it.
Well, and further illuminating the many capabilities of the vector, following along in the chat rooms online, you can see that some folks have specific uses that they gravitate towards, and other folks use everything on the vector. And even folks who are just toying with the idea of getting one, with the arpeggiator features alone, the kinds of generations that you can get out of that supersede a lot of the other things that are on the market for how quickly you can generate a variety of arpeggios and then store and recall those changes with such ease. And man, with the LaunchPad integration, it's just going to make for some really nice seamless arpeggiation swaps between songs. This is good stuff.
It works beautifully with my shiny new Rev 2 as a MIDI controller too. So yeah, so with your traditional black and white keyboard MIDI controller, and I know a lot of Eurorack people don't really care about black and white keyboard notes, but here I am talking about them in public. So you could use your big 5-octave keyboard if you want to generate. And when we talk about arpeggios, I mean, what we really mean is a series of notes that we're going to use over and over again, regardless of whether they make up a triad or a key, particular sensitive thing. It works beautifully. I've used it to control my CV modules in my rack. I've used it from the vector to my MIDI gear, all during the testing, and I couldn't break that aspect of it. So far, so good.
Good. Some questions from the field is, do the up down and down up notes repeat? They do not. So I checked on another keyboard to see what the standard behavior was, and so if you're playing, let me latches on 1 octave, and we'll just go for up mode, and so I'll play. So I'll play 3 notes, and of course I have to go back to up down mode.
Maybe just turn your delay down a little bit, Jim. Just
yeah.
If you don't mind, thank you.
I played C, D, and E, and so we get C, D, E, back to D, but no repeat of C or E. If I play 3, 4 notes, let me. C, D, E, F, E, D, and it's set to 6 steps. So C, D, E, F, E, D, and then back to C. So it doesn't repeat the top and the bottom notes. That's certainly a possibility. I was kind of playing around with that, writing through the code, and like, okay, what's the standard behavior? But that is something where we have a fair bit of flexibility in the mode setting. Is how do we, we can use up and down and up modes. We can use random modes. We could use some sort of random walk where it doesn't repeat notes. And right now it's always setting the length of the sequence based on the number of notes you play at one time. One of the things I'd like to do is have it so that it doesn't change the length; it just repeats it out for however long a sequence you have. So if you have, say, a 16-note sequence and you play
this would be cool.
3, 4, so you play 3 notes, it repeats those 3 notes out, and then I think you just get
+1.
Yeah, +1 at the end.
+1.
Right.
But you could use the Alt-2 playback mode to get that that note repeated each end if you wanted to. Like once you put your arpeggiated notes in, you could go back to your direction Alt-1, Alt-2 thing, and it would do the top and bottom notes, wouldn't it, Jim? I think.
Yes, because one of those modes does repeat the first and last note.
That's right.
So there are some
work around.
Yeah.
I think the random walk, like a Brownian sort of movement, would be really cool for arpeggio.
Yeah, I think that would be. I agree. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
There's a key question that hasn't come up. Can you play Eruption on it?
Not at this time.
That'll be a mode.
I mean, we could put enough fuzz on it that you might think it is, right?
All right, yeah, because you got to have the showroom demo patches, and you got to have like your, Anyway,
well,
sorry.
Steve, I'm so happy you volunteered to learn how to do that. So.
Oh yeah, no problem.
So, Jim, another question from the chat is: can you latch the arpeggio per part? I think that means, in other words, can you input one arpeggio from the LaunchPad to multiple parts to output various in-key notes?
Yes, partially, meaning that, well, okay, once it gets released, and they're still working through the details, right? But yeah, all these settings are per part, right? And so you can have all 8 parts listening to what's going on the keyboard, and they could be in ARP mode, or through mode, or transpose mode, or step record. Let's say you could have 2 in ARP mode. One can be latched, one can be unlatched. The octaves can be different, the modes can be different.
Well, let me ask a different kind of question, because it seems like per part you can have an arpeggio set depending on the record settings. Could you effectively take part 1 arpeggiation settings and split it to multiple outputs so that one setting is applied to all parts?
Yes. If you mean, can I take, like, if my source is USB-A, can I use that to generate tones via arpeggios to more than one part? Is that what you're asking, Cody?
I think my question more articulately would be, you've got this incredible arpeggio running on part 1, and now you want those settings on all of the other parts of melody. Would you have to just copy those settings over to each additional part, or could one part's modulation the other parts?
I believe it would be the former, because basically all you're doing here, it's really simple in essence, is it's a new way to enter notes into a pattern, preset, sorry. And once it's in that preset, it plays the notes out via whatever your routing is. You could have rec mode on in with the same settings across multiple parts, and then yeah, it would record those notes into the part, or the preset rather. But if you've got it in one and then you want to generalize it to somewhere else, then yeah, you'd have to go through your normal note copy paste things. Have I got that right, Jim?
Yeah, I think so.
And maybe to accomplish what I'm saying would be in the global settings and just output part number 1 to output 2 and 3 in order to get multi-timbral instruments receiving the same part.
On CD,
yeah, you can certainly do that. Yeah.
So multiple ways to kind of approach that. Cool.
Yeah. And I think this could also be an interesting workflow for people who use other modules that process MIDI or do CV processing, like I think the Symphonian does something like that as a way to feed material into those modules for further modification.
Yeah, and that's kind of what was sparking my interest, in addition to Travarsi's question from the chat, is oftentimes I'll have the impulse command on part 1 and the Voyager on part 2, and in my MIDI settings, occasionally I'll move those so that they're both outputting to the same part, or to the same, 2 devices are receiving output from one part, and then occasionally I split those. So that's kind of where that would be applicable, is if I'm stacking 2 synthesizer voices for a bass or a lead line, for those occasional moments where, maybe everything should be in the same arpeggiation path, versus other times when it shouldn't. But it's still pretty easy to copy and move some things around. So a couple of ways to accomplish that, which is nice.
Yeah. All right. So last on our Manic feature tour is something we saw earlier, but I didn't say what it was. It's called FreeGate, or FRGT for here. It might become a different name. This is something that I was playing around with as an idea, like Tuesday or Wednesday. I think I was talking to Cody about it, and
I think I was testing it like 5 minutes later. So
yeah. So the idea is, and this will probably get extended to other parameters as well, but the idea is that the gate sequence, when FreeGate is it only plays, basically you're setting the length of the gate sequence regardless of what the sequence control settings are, right? So sequence control like say I have an arpeggio running. Free gate is at 3. So only these 3 steps of the gate sequence are actually active. Even though the sequence is 6 steps long. Let's yes, now I have an 8-step sequence. So it's easy for me to set up a 3 feel on the gate side, even though the pattern is quite a bit longer. And it's just kind of fun to play with these, just these 3 parameters.
Hey Jim, just for a second, could you turn your chance ops off for those steps?
Yeah. There we go.
So in other words, this will help generate those kind of non-straightforward time signature sequences, and then still keep them in time instead of doing a bunch of complex math. This kind of takes some of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, instead of having to calculate it out in your head, right?
So you have an 8-step sequence right now, but you set it to 4 gates, right? So
I think it's at 5.
Okay, 5 gates. But it's playing through all 8 notes. Just those gates at the beginning are set.
So your 5 gates repeat over and over. So 1 to 5, 1 to 5, 1 to 5, decoupled from the first 5 pitch, so on. So it plays the first 5 gates and then pitches 6, 7, and 8. And I just had a camera fall on my foot. That was good, like it was a small one.
6, 7, and 8 will be 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3, exactly. So in effect, it's decoupling the pitch and the gate data, and it is super fun. Yeah, it is.
That seems pretty cool. What if you? What happens when you shift left and right? Is it still just the gates that are like 1 through 5 or 1 through 3?
Oh, that's a good
or
question.
will those shift with everything?
We're still figuring that out.
Okay. Right.
I haven't gotten that far. I mean, for example, there are a few usability things to work through, right? So normally when you have gates off and you go to pitch, those notes are grayed out, so you understand, have at least some sort of hint why they're not playing, right?
Yeah.
And because they no longer line up, I've turned that off for the demo, but Steve found the case, well, you can still, I think, press to mute, right? And we're still figuring out how that interacts with this whole free gate thing. And then, as you mentioned, shift left and right, we have to figure out what does that mean.
So it's very much in a basic form at the moment, but having said that, it's incredibly musically usable.
Yeah.
Especially, it's yeah, I mean, it's fun and it works.
Seems like a
it
ton
could
of
do
fun
heaps
to
more,
me.
but it's
Like
also
I want it now.
Yeah.
I was telling Jim, it kind of immediately brings things into drum and bass timings, like pretty quickly locking together some of those formats that previously required a bunch of maths and step skips. So it's pretty neat that those kinds of timings get a little easier for me to get into. I'd like to see it exercised on drum stuff.
How I would have done this previously is exactly what you're talking about. You decouple your gates. You might use some other thing that was sending 3 triggers. You'd mute one of them, and then all of a sudden you've got this feature, but you're using an additional module. So basically this feature takes away that need and allows you to program it all and increase and decrease the step length for your free gate. And also, if I was writing an email for a feature request, I'd say wouldn't it be fun to modulate that free gate quantity? That'd be just incredible. But,
yeah. That's definitely both external CV and internal.
Yeah. So if you could set up your 8 gates and then have something modulating the quantity of the gates in the free gate mode, you've just got hours of generative music. You know, I could be sort of a B grade State Azure and just walk away and let everything play for 3 hours, and it'd sound amazing. So he's amazing.
Yeah,
That would be fun.
Yep. So, okay, Steve.
Yeah.
I've covered pretty much everything that we were going to talk about in terms of new features. And again, the idea behind this release is this is going to be most of what you're looking at. There'll be some bug fixes, of course, and but the idea is to get this out in the field fairly quickly. I was tempted to send it some friends in Colorado, but they have a gig tonight, and I know how people are about loading test firmware, so we didn't want to tempt them. So
I ruined
anyway,
my own performance. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
You've covered almost everything I would have talked about there, Jim, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how you're planning to use this in your own setup, right? I know you've been working on some new tracks, and
well, okay. I'll just run through a couple of things if you want. Okay, I've got my screen set up. You should be able to see my vector, which is very well used.
Gotcha.
And my LaunchPad there. Yeah, excellent. So look, just to break a couple of those things down, I've got a bit of a part going here that should be making sound. Oh yes, sorry. I've just picked up a natural gate, and I've got it modulating on the decay, so you can hear this like really calming sound coming through. I just got used to hearing it for the last 3 days, and I don't even notice it's there anymore. How are my levels?
You could come down with your system audio just the tiniest amount. There, that's great.
Okay, so I just want to break apart. So what we've got here is a 1 octave pattern on played. I'm just going to break this down just in case anyone missed it. But let's put this as an up. In fact, we'll clear this pitch pattern, even though I quite like that little iteration there. What I've got is my settings for arpeggiation via USB-A, which is my LaunchPad, which is also on screen. I've got latching on, and I'm just using 1 octave in up mode. And what I'm going to do is hit run. And you can see that, well, I've hit run on my LaunchPad, and it started up the vector, which is normal behavior. I go to page 2, which is my fourths-based pitch control, and I hit 2 notes. Now you can see that the first 2 LEDs are flashing back and forwards there because I've hit 2 notes. So I'm going to release those 2 notes, and because I'm in latch mode, they stay working. Then what I need to do is go to gate mode and just turn the gates on, and all of a sudden I've got 2 notes. Now, if I go back to pitch, I'm going to turn my reverb down a little. If I go back to pitch, you can see that my first 2 notes are populated as C and G, because that's what I hit. The rest have remained as C5. I didn't touch anything there. And they're not playing, because the arpeggiator is smart enough to know you've played 2 notes, and I'm only going to populate 2 notes. So, just reiterating the fact that this ARP mode is basically just a new way of entering pitch, and also a new way of expressing that pitch or processing it. Now, if I go back to rec mode and I do this, octave 2, you can see that the vector's automatically gone. It's almost like I've just hit double, right? It's gone CG. Oh yeah, you had 2 steps. Now I've given you 4, and I've just copied them. Fantastic. So you can guess what will happen when I go to rec mode and hit 3. I mean, I'm breaking this down here. It's just done that for the 6 notes. So, okay. So now what if I go to okay, so if I go back to played mode, okay, free gate, 3, What am I doing here? It's a good thing I know the answer to that question because I'm about to explain it. What am I doing? What am I doing here? Sorry, Henry Rollins. Okay, I just slipped over to the second part that I wanted to talk about. I'm in a monophonic part going out to my Rev 2, and what you can see from what I'm doing here is I've got two presets organized. Now I'm just going to hit run again. Wow, that's an amazing melody. So that's just demonstrating that at this point, yes, the program changes do work going out to my MIDI device here. Loads of fun, of course, because you can use your LaunchPad now not only to control your presets and the notes that are going out, but also to pre-automate which sounds from your MIDI devices are gonna happen. And I would expect that anyone hearing this feature will be thinking about how they can control their presets on all sorts of devices. For instance, I've got a Morningstar, it's a guitar pedal nominally that controls MIDI. I think it's an MC6 is what it's called. I can tell that preset X, say preset 7, and then within that I can send out huge amounts of MIDI to other devices too. So although the vector's only sending one program change, the other device down the trail might be sending a whole bunch of other things. I know I just broke that down in very simple things, but just from a musical performance perspective, it's going to be great fun. Yeah, that's me.
So I want to touch on something now that we've gone a little more into program change. Earlier in the chat, we had a question that is incredible for a 2-vector combination setup. And I think Jim and myself were chatting about this recently, and I think now there are some bugs that were fixed in that setup previously that are going to come in the next official firmware update, pass time through, etc. But the question involved here is like, if you send a program change from the first vector to the second vector, then you can orchestrate bigger song movements. Is kind of how I'm interpreting this question, where there's a leader-follower functionality, so that the secondary vector could be synchronized to the primary vector, and that the secondary vector scenes would trigger at the same time as the primary. So there's kind of two ways that I see implementation there. One being doubling the amount of capacity of your vector sequencer system, and the secondary option or alternate option being having an A-B song pattern on 2 different machines and 2 different voice setups and 2 different everything, and they're both kind of following each other throughout the set. Is that something that the program change might be able to support now or in the future?
Theoretically, yes. I haven't tried that yet, but we already have program change input to trigger scenes and or preset changes. Those are tied to specific channels, so I just have to make sure if once someone's doing the setup that they're saying, yeah, this is output on a certain MIDI channel. 16, I think, is the MIDI channel for scenes. There's also just the general potential confusion that you may also be sending notes from that part, so there may be some details that we would have to look at. But it's certainly a possibility. It's definitely something we should test. We could try that out at our next local meetup. That could be interesting.
Yeah. So effectively, with proper routing and a bit of articulate planning of your MIDI routings, And anybody who's doing advanced MIDI routings know that they all require articulate planning when you get past just sending things down one channel. So that's cool. So basically you could split the program change to a specific channel, and potentially, as long as the other devices are able to receive those command messages, then they could effectively change presets and things. Neat.
Yep. And yeah, I mean, it's not infrequent that I'm jamming with someone else who has a vector. Chris and I worked several times together, and being able to trigger scenes at the same time could be interesting. It could be interesting and useful in an interesting way, and interesting in a potentially interesting way of changing someone's presets without them realizing you changed it. So
vectors sound contagious at this point, and if anyone does this with a 2-vector setup, I'm going to have to get a third one, because
I might see you on that second functionality there shortly.
Yeah. All right. Well, I finished talking about the bits I wanted to talk about. I think I just repeated some of the things that Jim said, but here we are. Yeah.
Okay. Let me give me a second.
Get us.
Going to.
I really need to clean my vector.
Get start talking to Jason, our special guest, Dysonant, and let me get this artwork up, because you guys are doing a big show next weekend, and it's just take me a minute to queue up this image. There we are.
And just remember, just while you're doing that, with the arpeggiation, you can also go into your length, your repeats, all that stuff, and have that on a per step basis too. Yeah, it's just so simple and elegant in that way that it allows you to take advantage of the features that are already on the vector, but with that new way of inputting the notes. It's just, yeah, good fun.
Yeah. So, anyway, so, Dysonant, can you tell us a little bit about New York Modular Society and their events?
Sure. So we've been around for a little over 2 years. Started on Discord with Ben the Glorious Bastard and Saddle Up the Robots. Saddle Up the Robots, I think, is in chat right now. And we decided that we wanted to throw a show, because at first it was just a Discord, and we set up our first show in September at a place called Much More's in Brooklyn, and we had, I'm not even sure, I think it might have been 8 artists that played that night, and that format's sort of stuck. We usually have about 6 to 8 artists that'll play a show. And we did that for several months, and our last show was on February 29th, actually. So at this place called Wonderville, which is like an independent developer arcade, right? So
nice.
All of these really cool independently developed arcade games, actual big giant arcade games.
Wow.
Yeah. And we went from, having a decent-sized audience at our first one, maybe 50, 60 people, to that show, which was like about 150 people. And we had several other shows planned. COVID hit, and we learned how to stream. And we've been streaming almost every week now for the past 18 months or so. We took a little break this July to get prepared for going back to live, and I'm super excited about this show. It's at Project Parlor, as you can see, which is in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, and we have 8 artists because it is a kind of special event. We're gonna try to stick to 6 because 8 gets a bit unwieldy, and we're gonna do it in groups. A few artists will play, and then since it's a daytime event, there's barbecue, there's beer, there's booze, and we'll go
Beer?
to a DJ for a little while, and then we'll go back to the artists, and then we'll go to a DJ, and then back, and it's about 5 hours is what we're doing. It'll be from 4 p.m. until 9 p.m.
Awesome.
Sounds like a great time.
Yeah, I'm super psyched about it. It's so nice to be returning to playing in public with a bunch of people, and it's kind of crazy right now. We have probably close to 200 people coming, which was unexpected after COVID. I sort of expected it to go down, and I would have been happy if we got 50 there, but yeah, 4 times that.
Yeah, it's pretty rad. If it's one of the benefits of COVID for the synthesizer scene is how many people really decided to dive in during COVID and really get involved and really develop some new skill sets, and there's a lot of new talent on the scene. It's wonderful.
There absolutely is, and you know that's New York Modular Society Discord is there for those people. Like if anyone watching isn't on it, you should join. It is a fun place to be. It's a safe place to be. It's really positive, and everybody props everyone else up instead of tearing them down.
Nice.
So that to me is one of the best things about it, is the positivity that comes out of it. It's incredible.
That's wonderful, and congratulations on getting out and playing live too. That's yeah, good on you. Creating that positive energy with music is it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, so you've got some music to play for us today. You probably need a couple minutes to set up. Is that?
I actually, what I want to do is test the sound real quick, and if you hear it coming through, then I think I'll be good. So,
Okay. Yeah. We can.
Yeah.
We're happy to do that.
It'll just take me 1 sec, actually. Hold on. I'm gonna switch my camera. Are you able to hear that kick?
Yeah, it's good.
Absolutely.
Maybe a little more level.
A little more level. All right.
Yeah.
A little more orange would be good too.
All right. How's that on level?
It's good.
That's good.
Okay. I'm gonna mute my mic and do this.
All right.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Nice work.
Lovely.
That was
Lovely.
incredibly good.
And just that perfect little feedback swell at the end. That's great.
Yeah, nice executions of scenes and preset management. That was wonderful.
Yeah, I use that a lot.
And the sticky tape labeling. I'm a huge fan, by the way.
I have to do that, otherwise I get lost.
Me too. Yeah, it's nice to see you navigate through your system like that. That was great stuff. Really inspiring.
Yeah, beautiful
Thank you.
stuff.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Whoa.
Oh wow, reprise.
Yeah. Hold on. Let's turn it
Encore.
off. I don't know where that came from. So.
It sounded good.
Yeah.
It did.
Oh, I actually think it's just a really long note that I have on. I think I'm going on whole notes on that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice evolving changes through there. I mean, there's an entire set that could be extended even further through each of those different transitions. I mean, there was 10 or 20 different ideas that I heard in there, a whole record of stuff. Nice work.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah. It's definitely possible because of the vector. I'd say that prior to that, like, I was coming close to a lot of things and realized a lot of stuff and having a lot of fun, but the vector sequencer has helped me realize a whole new bunch of things. So.
Yeah, same. And the fact that we get access to our community input to manipulate the product in its future iterations is mind-blowing to me. As a community, we can craft our instrument together. It's inspiring. It's great to see it all happen.
Yeah, thank you.
Someone just wrote Sonic Sneak Attack on the on that recurring note there. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. Hey, just incredible dynamics too, Dysonant. I think that probably what stands out, apart from the technical mastery of your system that you've got, is also the musical choices about how you move through your dynamic ranges. Like, there was one point where I thought you were winding the track down, and I was thinking, oh no, I haven't had enough yet. And then you came back in with some new stuff. And look, how do you? It's a big question, but those dynamic changes and transitions, how do you think about those when you're writing and performing to kind of make them seem so easy? Go.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, but I think what I often do is I'll start building a track one part at a time, but I'll keep going until I have every part full. And then it's like this big, massive thing, right? And then I do some subtractive editing, but I keep the melodies and bass and everything quite simple during that first part. It's rhythmic and harmonic, just trying to set everything in their space. But once I have that big thing, I start subtracting things and maybe arranging some of it. And it's just all on maybe, one pattern for each thing. And then what I'll do is I'll start with, let's say, I don't know, the bass line or something. And it's pretty simple at this point, but what I do is I copy it to another pattern, and then I start fooling around with it. Sometimes it's just adding some randomness to it, but quite often what I end up doing is using the sub-sequencers pretty heavily. I like running them at different times from the main sequence itself, so that they're asynchronous. And I might, if I want the pattern to stay relatively normal, then I'll keep them at an even number of steps. And I'll do one with octave, and then I'd do another with transpose. So if they're asynchronous and the sequence itself is asynchronous, then I start getting these much longer patterns that are way more complicated out of each one. And that'll become, one of those instances might become part 2, but maybe I'm only using sequencer 1, and maybe I'm only using 2 steps in subsequencer 1, right? And then part 3, I might increase that to 4 steps or 5 steps or something like that. And then part 4, I'll copy that and I'll turn on subsequencer 2, which is now affecting your octave and transpose within a particular key that I choose, whatever it happens to be. I don't know, that's probably C harmonic minor. That's usually what I'm in. So that same concept gets done over melodic parts, and then on rhythmic parts it's somewhat similar, but I'm not using the subsequencers as much, and I'm using more of the chance operations in vector for that. And with the percussion, I'm also running a drum channel. That is second to, because I'm using 4 of the parts for drums.
4 parts
so,
for drums, so 16
yeah, right.
potential, right?
Yeah, so I have 4 parts, which each one is outputting gates to a single voice. So my kick is 1 part, my snare is another part, percussion and hi-hat. And those also, I'm using pitch and velocity pretty heavily for dynamics within that. I have the velocity for each of those plugged straight into my WMD performance sequencer, so that I can actually do real velocity with the drums to have volume dynamics.
Sorry, Dissonant. So what you're saying there is you're using 4 parts for drums. Are you using them as monophonic parts for each drum sound?
I am, yes.
And that's how you're getting that extra control. And also, obviously, I'm going to use the word disconnection. It's the wrong word, but the ability to layer and sequence those different monophonic drum parts in different ways. Yeah, all right. That's cool. That's very cool.
But then I use a drum part also. So you may have noticed like a lot of dynamics that rhythmic dynamics that weren't sequenced actually. Well, they are kind of. It's weird. I'm using, on the 7th part, I'm using an actual drum part, and I'm using gates. I don't know which on the expander. It's 7, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is what they are. So I guess, I don't know, there's that bank of 8 gates that come out of the thing, and I'm just using the top row for a drum part. Now those, my monophonic parts all go into a switch, and that drum part corresponds to each of the kick, snare, percussion, and hats also, which go into that switch, right? And then I'm able to flip between them. So if I'm mostly using that drum part for fills and for other rhythmic elements that are a little more asynchronous with what's happening, and I flip between the two.
So that's manual. And is that switching module, the noise engineering, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it.
It's the Confundo Funkitis.
I know it's got the word funk in it. Yeah, Confundo Funkitis, yes. I saw one of those come up locally for a ridiculous price recently, and I thought, anyway. They look amazing. Yeah, so you're doing manual switching there, so that would be for some of those faster triggering sections and so on, which I thought were beautifully integrated. Yeah, no, that's a really nice way to do things, obviously, and yeah, I think I did something a bit similar with my WMD Select as a switch when I was using the a couple of parts from the Vector or the DNI Pro Dot module as well. But that execution was beautiful, and thanks for that explanation there too, because that was really detailed. Um, can I ask you just a couple of questions about sounds? Because there seemed to be a
Yeah.
lot going on. Because we're talking about percussion, just to start with, and then we'll move on to the melodic parts, I guess. What are you using to generate the percussion sounds? Obviously, it's routing via your WMD performance mixer, but yeah, what are the tone generators?
So that changes so often in my system, and I'll tell you what it is right now. But after this show on the 24th, it's gonna change again.
Okay.
So, but right now I'm using a microplates for the kick.
Yep, nice.
And I really actually like the kick model in that. It's super flexible, and it allows me to get sounds that I can't often get from the only other kick module that I had that sounded as good, which was analog. It actually sounded better. Was the steady state Fate entity bass. That thing is amazing.
Yeah.
And just sounds so good in a mix. And then for the snare, I'm using a really old module, Audio Damaged Neuron, right now. It's a FM drum module, so it has noise built into it, and it has 2 operators and a pitch sweep, and it's really flexible for the sounds that you can get out of it. So it's like a FM snare. And then I'm using the Sys 05 from Michigan Synthworks.
Yep.
Which is the Syncussion
Yep.
Eurorack module, which is really cool.
It is a great module.
Yeah, and at the moment, my hi-hats are Basimilis Terratas, and that is the percussion, but they all actually are multed, and they all run into Maze, which is a sequential switch matrix mixer with attenuation. That thing's freaking awesome.
I don't know that one. Does anyone familiar with that? Can drop a link in the chat, please, guys? Yeah, that sounds fun.
It's really cool. It's by Livestock Electronics. So it's a 4-channel matrix mixer. So and those mults, they run out to, I've only got 3 effects hooked up right now, so I'm not using the 4th out. But they run, I've created a complicated send return is basically what it is. It's just a very overwrought and overcomplicated send return. They go out to 3 effects, but I can set the level of effects for the percussion on each of them, and then there's presets for it that I can step through. Also, I could do it with voltage, but I don't have another voltage source right now that allows me to sequence it, so I'm doing it manually. But if there was, like, you know, a jack expander that had, you know, 4 more channels on it for I'd be set.
How about 16 more channels? How about 16 more channels?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could use 16 more channels. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
64 steps each.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you talking about? 128.
So the sounds of the drums also go through a bunch of weird effects, distortions and delays and whatnot. So
Mostly Eurorack effects, or you use pedals
yeah.
too? Or? Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're everything is in the case. So yeah, nothing tonight came from outside that case, and there's only one thing in that case that's a sampler too. So the arbor, and that was like those weird like sort of chain dragging noises that were sort of amorphous. It's hard to explain them.
We won't ask where you sampled those from, but no, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it sounded incredible. Thank you for the detail. There was some melodic stuff there that I really enjoyed too. All of it, in fact, not some of it. Yes. So where were you sort of taking that from?
Well, I extended the vector recently. I got a M-Brain, which is
I've got
Michigan
one of those.
Synthworks yarns, basically.
Yeah.
It's a yarns clone. And so I'm using MIDI out to that, and that goes into a chainsaw, which allows me to get pads.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm using, like, I have, I mean, it's paraphonic, but I have polysynth in the case, which is really cool. I did that recently because the shows, real life shows, are coming back, and I can't bring all of my gear with me that I've had for the past year accessible. So
yeah, it's a great combination, taking the MIDI out from the vector for a chord or whatever part, and then the little M-Brains, the 6HP breakouts are just easy. I use it with my Troika in a similar way to what you would with your chainsaw.
It's kind of awesome. It's a really good way to do things. I mean, I guess I could get 4 more channels if I could fit another M-Brain in there. So I just have to.
You really could.
Yeah.
And especially with the feature that we put, that I nagged about, and Jim did all the hard work, with the MIDI channel spread as well is really handy for that as well. That was that sealed it for me. It just made my M-Brain and vector work so beautifully together. And that's the thing with I don't want to sound the sales pitch here, but the vector and the integration with all those other things you're talking about, it just brings it all home into but a main user interface to sort of manage all that stuff. And
it really does.
I really enjoy hearing. Sorry, you go. You go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, one thing that it allows me to do, is kind of presets in a way. Like the bass at the very beginning of the noise, later became the lead, and the lead became the bass. I can flip-flop things around like that as long as they track really well. Volt per octave, you can just flop things to get new sounds and timbres. So
well, I got something you're probably already aware of it, but to just shout out to the Clavis Caltrans for that kind of thing too, which I know Chris Meyer's a fan of as well, but to help you with your pitch tracking and make a bass voice usable across multiple ranges, for example, it's just really good fun. So I use that out of my vector, just to control, if I'm doing things like the Troika and I want to make sure my intervals are pitching correctly, it's great fun. But no, that's incredible. I can't wait to see what you do with the free gate option too, because I can see that would be right up your alley, so to speak. It brings that functionality, as I said, that I would have done using a separate module, all into one. So I can't wait to see what you do with that, to be honest, Dysonant.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited for it. That the second I saw that feature, I was like, yeah, need.
Oh yeah.
Good. I know it's not even figured out yet. It's just an idea, but like it's enough even as it is.
It is. Yeah. Oh. Anyway.
So I notice you're using a lot of scenes and presets. I'm just curious. Can you tell us how many average presets per part you were using for that piece? And then I think I saw maybe 20-25 scenes.
Yeah, you're about right on the scenes. It's funny, I usually stay at 16 steps, but I tried switching one to 32 on one of the parts, and that was a mistake for me, because I didn't have enough scenes when I did that, and the way I use the vector, you're able to get so much variation even out of really short sequences. I don't know if you saw it, but I did a video once I took a 2-step sequence and I just did everything I could possibly do.
I've seen that
2-step sequence.
I didn't realize that was you. That was a great video. Yeah.
It was long and meandering, but it was fun. But I probably had about let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Depending on the voice, at least 16 scenes per part. Yeah.
Presets.
Yeah, presets. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. At least 16 presets. Yeah. And then in the playlist, yeah, I went up to 25. Yeah. I think. And
Wow.
I do get heavy use out of that because it allows me to jam a little more if I want to. And also get really precise transitions, which was always an extremely difficult thing in Eurorack for me at the beginning. So, yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, that's a lot of detail in there. A bigger question. You do a lot of performances and so on. Have you got sort of plans to pull some of these things together and for something that I can, listen to while I'm walking around cleaning my house in lockdown? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, great.
I have a few performances from the past year that I have not released yet, but they're recorded, and I just need to get them mastered and put them out. The one that you just heard, it's changed a little bit since last week, but I did last week for Modular Podcast live show at the East Village Playhouse, and I'm gonna play it again next Saturday, actually.
Nice.
And it might change a little, but I'm definitely gonna record that and put that one out.
Yeah.
And then, I've been tooling around thinking about trying to do an album with some shorter songs, because a lot of these things, Cody was talking about how there was a bunch of ideas in there, and how it was a lot of things. And usually if I'm playing for more than 10 minutes, and it's usually around 15 to 30 minutes, somewhere in there, I'm kind of going to have at least 3, if not 5 different sort of songs, mini songs in that piece. Yeah. And in that one there's definitely 3 distinct pieces, but then I merged 2 of them at the end, which gave me a 4th. So
I just love using the vector in that kind of format. You can take those ideas and integrate them into each other and form a whole new idea so quickly. And I think you had touched on it earlier, how you'll save a part and maybe come back to it later and kind of reformat it, remangle it, and make it another piece. But it still flows because it all kind of came from the same palette. And that's what helps me, when I'm working in the presets and scenes, like I'm building my palette. And then now, like, how much do I just want to shift that palette in and out of the next set of palettes? So it's nice. You orchestrated that really well.
Thank you. Thanks.
A really nice piece overall. Thanks for joining us and giving the performance.
Thank you
yeah.
for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of fun.
Yep. So just one more shout out for your event next weekend.
Yeah, tickets are free for this one, and they're on Eventbrite. There's links on our website. And
Are you going to stream it?
No, because Ethernet cable, and it's a little hard at this place to do it because it's a backyard and we're going to be so far away from any router. It's just not going to work. But we're definitely going to record it.
Cool.
And I think we're going to stream it at a later date.
Awesome. That'll scratch the itch.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to open up to kind of general discussion. I've thought of one demo I'd like to give, showing the sub-sequencers and that trick we used, one on octave and one on semitones. That's always a fun demo, and I'm kind of curious to see how that plays into the arpeggiator. like to do that one. And so let me flip back over to my system and back into like demo land where I get to sit and stare at the system when something doesn't seem to work properly. So I'm going to start with an empty sequence. So basically just a single repeated note. I'm going to go over to the modulation tab, look at subsequence 1. I'm going to set the length to I'll go with 4, and we'll go with 5. So nice to combine odd numbers that way. I'm going to set it to be on octave at enable, and I'm going to set the rate at we'll go with 16th notes for now, and I'll transpose the first octave up and we'll say the fourth one down. So now I got 2 going up an octave and 2 going down an octave. Go over to the second subsequencer, set that again to 16th notes, and we're going to make this start with 4 and see how we get there, and do transpose on the pattern. Still nothing in the sequence, so now let's turn the arpeggio on and see how crazy this gets. Because we can, turn on the free 8.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's super good.
Yeah, way cool.
Yeah, that was fun. So
That sounded great.
you know, it kind
That
of
was awesome.
gets back to a comment that Dysonant made about being able to work with short sequences, and I'm totally a fan of that way of working, where instead of trying to write out a really long pattern that sounds just right, is just say, okay, I'm going to start with just 2 or 3 notes and just start adding, you know, modulation and some chance operations. And great thing about the arpeggiator is now it just makes it so much easier to figure out what those 3 or 4 notes are after you've got the other things set up. And
Hey, Jim.
yeah.
I was just thinking when you were doing that, random question for you without notice.
Uh-huh.
What would what would happen if you took external modulation in and pointed that to like your P512 type or 712 is it? No, it's 512 modulation input to the arpeggiated note data.
Well, it would be similar to
Just
you know,
anything else, I
the
guess.
semitone modulation I added. It would just be over a wider range or
Yeah.
more notes range, and
There's so many options.
yeah, just a little more craziness, right?
Yeah, that's probably
Yeah.
why I thought of it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And I think being able to modulate the free gate length, and I'm not even sure I dare mention this, but it's relatively late in the talk, so nobody's gonna really know about this yet. But when I have the free gate running, it's nice because you just have 3 or 5 steps typically, right? I mean, for what I like to do.
Yeah.
And and I just like to sit here and just kind of work the knob patterns and change the emphasis on the steps. And you can certainly use an external CV to modulate whatever the gate time is of the current step that you're at, and that's a nice way to work. But also, maybe particularly with, say, a short gate sequences, just say modulate just one of those values, and
Right.
that becomes a little tricky on the UI side of things, but that's maybe an interesting thing to think about,
Right.
So, but just between the two of us, right?
Yeah, sure.
All two
No
times
one's
12
looking
of
for
us.
Yeah.
Nice work. Yeah, such great new features. I'm looking forward to utilizing this arpeggiator scenario, because I feel like I can navigate the vector in a way that's pleasing to me very quickly with rhythm programming and such. And it has so many features for melodic programming that I often overlook trying to get that perfect 32-step sequence, when I see features like this and it just can generate those notes and keep them all syncopated and in key with each other. That, for folks like me who might be more rhythmically oriented, these kinds of features make it more feasible to finish a track or to have more jammable melodic things along with the rhythmic stuff. So nice work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a really nice thing to add in. Still gotta. I'm getting private messages for people asking for beta copies, so we'll move quickly to get this all tied up and out in the field for everybody. And
Sweet.
So yeah, so winding down, thanks again for Dysonant joining us this afternoon, playing some great music. And scenes are opening up all over the country. People are getting together in person, and that's great to see. And we're going to keep going with our live streams, of course. And so contact us on the Facebook forum, send me emails, tell me what you think about the new features. We're going to get this out to everybody as soon as I think it's reasonably safe to do so. I'm also having people threatening who want to use it on gigs all of this coming week. So anyway, it's going to be fun. So thanks everybody for joining in, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Get our end graphic up. Let's see. Here we go. There we are. All right, now we're winding down.